Hola, my name is Escobar Saavedra, and I'm an artist and a craft person born in Colombia. I lived for 16 years in Europe, and I have been in the UAE since 2020. My path to becoming an artist is quite atypical. My mom was a practicing artist when I was a child, and then for things of life she changed career, but I had been surrounded by art history and art all my life. Let's say the first connection I had with art was through textile and sewing. My grandmother taught me to sew and embroider when I was a child, and I wanted to make my own clothes. I was fascinated by fashion at the time. So I started with fashion, then I moved slowly to jewelry. So I trained myself as a goldsmith. I was very interested in techniques, in the format, in the patience, and then I understood the possibilities of jewelry as an art form. When I started to study jewelry, I wanted something that I could handle from beginning to end in my studio. I understood that the industry was quite big in terms of the steps you had to do in order to produce a collection, and I wanted something more simple. I wanted something that I could translate an idea into an object. What was interesting for me about jewelry is that in archaeological findings through jewelry you can understand how advanced the techniques were from a civilization, how the people live, how they connected to these objects that you carry. But at the same time, I was not very interested in the adornment part of it. I was more interested in the stories linked to these objects, and this made me understand that it could be wider objects, domestic objects. I'm very interested in everything that is linked to our human nature. So it can be a chair, it can be a table, it can be an object of the house. And in that sense, my practice started expanding from a small object that you can wear on your body to other things that gravitate around the body. I stayed within this field for 10 years, and when I arrived in the UAE, I started to explore new formats and new mediums and new sizes, and somehow my practice is still evolving into something else. I was invited to an exhibition in a mineralogy museum, and the only requirement was to work with stone or minerals. And at the time I didn't know anything about stone. I was already interested. Of course, coming from the jewelry, you have all the gems. So I contacted a lapidary. I commissioned some pieces from him for the project. I did some printing on the stones, and the project was lovely, but I wanted to know more. So I went to a small town in Germany, a town of lapidaries, and I took short classes and I started interacting with the material. But immediately I felt overwhelmed by the beauty of the stones and the fact that they carry so much information already. So I was always wondering what I can do to this. I started to collect more like mundane objects or discarded objects. So I started working with pebbles. Then when I arrived here, I started to see stone everywhere. I knew that the marble and the granite was very present, so I started to wonder, where can I find this? Very intuitively, I went to the industrial area in Sharjah, and I started to see that there were pieces of marble everywhere in the floor, and the factories were very kind and offered me some of the pieces, and that's how I started to work with this material. And this came after another project where I was already using things that I had found in nature or things that were meant to be discarded. So I think with the years I have understood that my practice is a lot about working with discarded materials, the aspect of working with these materials that are unusual. It's interesting for me. I don't have like an academic research background, but I do read a lot. I fill myself with readings and thoughts. I listen a lot to podcasts, and I start experimenting directly with materials. And I always think a lot on my head before I make a piece. Like I try to visualize it instead of drawing before I make it. I have always questioned myself how my practice would change if I had this ideal artist studio space. I have always had a corner of my house for working. It's only recently that I have had the chance to work in a place like this. I like to think that my studio is nomadic in the sense that kind of liminal. I like to have this idea of the threshold, that I can go from one side to the other, so have a very homey table that I can always come back to, and I look for the place that is ideal for the medium I'm experimenting in that moment. When I arrived in the UAE, I decided to go back to school and pursue studies in art. But because I have a family and I could not move, I was the only online student, and I needed to find strategies on how to share my work with my teachers. At a certain moment, this house was still on renovations and I needed to make a presentation. Keith and his brother allowed me to use the gallery space. I used the same nails that were already there, the same shelves, and I displayed my work. And it became a sort of exhibition. I made a video project on the facade. And later I wanted to do a project where I could work several days without having to move the things. So I asked if I could work on the rooftop. And without knowing, it became sort of residency, because I was coming every day for 2 weeks to the rooftop to work and to document a project that later became a performance. I did some work in the corridor and in the living room. And then, out of a joke, I said, the only place I haven't used yet is the bathroom. And we laughed about it with Gaith, and then I went home. And at the time I was already starting to work in my own bathroom at home that was super tiny in the shower to carve stone. So I thought about it, okay, this is perfect. I'm gonna ask if I can use the bathroom in Beit al-Mamsar. Gaith said yes, and I started to bring machines, and I worked in my project in 2023 first. Then in 2024 we opened it for people to come. So the idea of a residency became a little bit more clear. Hopefully in the future it can be also a residency for other artists. So that's how the bathroom art residency started in this house. And this year I had the opportunity to extend to the laundry room. So having the drainage and the faucets helped the work, and this is how now I'm using the laundry room. I guess depend on every project. The needs are specific. It's true that for carving stone you need certain machinery, certain access to water, because the machines work with water. The possibility to make noise, the possibility to make a mess, which is not always easy, for example, in a private house. So I could not do it at home, so I'm very grateful I could do it here. But if I'm working with textile or embroidery, I can do it in my dining table. For jewelry, I need certain tools that I have been collecting through the years, but I don't need that much space. So it really depends on the project. So for me, a studio space can be anywhere. And what I think is important is that for an artist to get the opportunity to work in a place that is not being used, that is not very typical, it can be a great gift, like it happened to me here with the bathroom. This allows me to do a certain work that doesn't need a perfect, beautiful space. It needs a space that is adapted to the work I'm making. I'm very drawn to domestic spaces, and the thing that made me fall in love with this house is that it was the grandmother's house of Keith and Khaled. I find it very peaceful to work in a house that had a story, that had a life. I always have ongoing projects on textile or embroidery, so I feel very comfortable doing this. In jewelry, there is a setup that has to be very precise. It needs a different mindset, and stone also has another mindset. It can be very meditative, but still you have to be very aware. You have to listen to the material because it can break at any moment. With textile, I feel more free. So when I'm stuck, I usually go to textile and I read a lot. I take a break, and I try not to think about it and do something else. After the pandemics, I started questioning myself a lot about our bodies and how do we exist within and beyond our physical bodies. I guess this question has been present from the beginning of my practice, but more after COVID. And I started to read a lot of academic papers on psychology and philosophy, and suddenly I started to question myself, the bigger questions, of humanity, about being, about existing, about what is real, what is truth. And I felt very overwhelmed. The more I was reading papers, the more confused I was, the more I felt that I have to go back to zero, I have to learn everything again. So when the moment of making work happened, I decided to forget everything and just start kind of digging into my own body. After being an online student, a digital person, I really needed to feel my body. So I started to make photos of my skin, make macro photos of my documents. What do they say about me? Who am I in this world? And this is how a bigger project that is called Porous started. The questions, ideas of existence and movement, migration, how do we stand in a land that hosts us? What do we start life with? And I started to see these things that repeats in all the objects that accompany us from birth to death. And you have usually the same things. You have a name, you have a date, you have a place of birth. And you can observe these things from an angle that is very emotional and sentimental, or from a very bureaucratic side. So I started to explore these notions. And for the current project, I accepted the challenge of 4-1 to try to explore a different scale of work. I'm confronting myself to a completely different way of working with works that are much bigger. In this exhibition is the first time I'm going to do very big work. I'm excited. It is not easy to work in a completely different medium or scale, because a lot of the things happen outside of my studio. I'm used to having control of a piece from beginning to end. And here I work with a factory, and just the fact that normally I can carry my work in a box and now I have to hire a crane to move it, it's very different. The laundry room that I'm occupying right now will have a second life and will become something else. So I'm very excited to see what will happen in this space in the future. I will continue to work in the bathroom residency. I'm hoping to open it again to people coming and experiment with the machines in the fall. Going to a new space is always bringing new things to the work, and I find this very interesting. And I guess I will continue with this evolution of my work to try to understand how I can fit in this world.